Hey friends, today I'm pretty excited to announce that we'll be kicking off something brand new, intended to encourage you as we head into our launch season as a church. We're calling it our Weekly Word. This will be a great opportunity for us to send out some biblical encouragement and some weekly inspiration as we prepare to launch Courageous Church. We hope that you'll find it helpful, and if you do, well, feel free to share it with your friends and your family. Each week, I'll be tackling different topics and issues aimed at equipping and empowering you to love, follow, and serve Jesus courageously in your life today. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Today I want to talk about transition. Recently I was given the opportunity to speak on transition, and if you've been following our story over the past year, well, you know our life has been nothing but one great big transition. So, this personally hits home for us in a huge way, but here's what I'm learning about transition. Our lives are always in transition. Yes, there are certainly moments or even seasons within our life when things change more drastically and sometimes more rapidly than at other times, but life is all about change, and that's something that we often wrestle with. Here's a couple things that I'm noticing. When in transition, the biggest thing that you always encounter first is your own fear. Fear is that often loud voice that reminds you of everything that could possibly go wrong with the change that you're making, or the step that you're taking, or the investment that you're risking. It's that invisible force that often impedes your ability to move forward in life, but it doesn't have to be your master. A few years ago, I read a book entitled Start, Punch Fear in the Face, Escape Average, and Do Work That Matters. In addition to that being a fantastic title for a book, it's also a great strategy for tackling your fear. You've got to punch it right in the face. You've got to hit back. In other words, you've got to take an offensive position against fear having dominance in your life. And here's how I believe you can do that. By recognizing that God is bigger than your fears. Interestingly, within the scriptures, we are commanded over and over again not to fear, not to be afraid. Well, easier said than done, right? Sure. But here's the kicker. That command always comes with a promise, and that promise is God's presence. That God will always be with us, that He will never leave us or forsake us. How awesome is that? But it's almost as if we need to be reminded. Why? Because we too often forget. And when we forget, we allow fear to rule in our life. But it doesn't have to. I love the story that we find in 2 Kings chapter 6. There we read that the king of Syria was warring against Israel. Sound familiar? Early one morning, Elisha the prophet and his servant awoke to find that a Syrian army with horses and chariots were all around the city. In other words, it had come under siege. The servant says to Elisha in verse 15, "Alas, what shall we do?" Well, isn't that typically our response too when we're facing challenges in our lives? What shall we do? Fear is often the first thing that we feel and face, especially when it seems like there are no other options available to us. What shall we do when times are tough? What shall we do when the relationship doesn't work out? What shall we do when the new job isn't all that it's cracked up to be? What shall we do? And I love the prophet Elisha's response in verse 16. "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Do not be afraid. Well, there it is. Elisha takes an offensive position against fear, and with what? The promise of God's presence with them. Those who are with us, he says, are more than those who are with them. Elisha then prays, and God opens the eyes of the young servant to see that the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire. A pretty amazing sight to behold, for sure. But here's the point. It's normal to feel fear when you're in transition or about to make a big decision, but it doesn't have to be your master. Like Elisha, you can lean into the reality that God is with you and that God is for you. Today, my encouragement for you is simply this. Take an active position against fear in your life by knowing that God is with you. Even when it doesn't feel like it, God is with you. Even when the odds are stacked against you, God is with you. And like Paul says in Romans chapter 8, verse 31, if God is for us, who can be against us? Friends, God is bigger than your fears. So get after it, take the next step, and watch how things begin to change for the better in your life today. Hey, I look forward to doing this again, and who knows, I might even have a few others chime in from time to time. We'll see. Until next time, be courageous.